There was a time years ago when the Cabinet Office was the Rolls Royce of the British civil service. But now it's barely a Trabant.
So, lots to discuss this morning. Let's begin with the Prime Minister's remarks that are happening later on this morning, signalling new powers to control social media usage and access after identifying the potential harms to children. We've heard from the government, we've heard from Ian Russell as well on the programme. Andrew, what do you think of this idea? It sounded like, from Liz Kendall's conversation with Kate earlier, it sounds like the government is moving towards banning social media for under-16s this year.
Yeah, the cynic in me thinks the government loves to talk about this because it means it doesn't have to talk about other things that are much more embarrassing, like the Epstein files or the economy or our lack of spending on defence. The more incompetent government becomes, the more it seems it wants to do things to extend its reach. I mean, if it's going to do it might as well get on with it and do it rather than delay. If it thinks it's a great thing to do, let's do it. I thought before we came on air this morning, it would be worth speaking to my contacts in Australia, where they've had a ban now for several months of under-16s on social media. And so I did. And the message from Australia, it's early days. It's still in its infancy, this ban, but it's very similar to what the British government is proposing, is that the big tech giants they're following the law, the rules, they're implementing the ban, but the kids are not. There's a surprise. So the law in Australia puts the onus not on the kids not to do it, but on the tech companies to stop them from doing it. So the tech companies there, on pain of major fines. So the tech companies there have put in new age verification systems, new demands for ID, banning accounts, closing accounts, and all the rest of it. So they've done what they think they can do so far. The kids, however, have discovered VPNs, if they didn't know them beforehand. They've discovered that AI can change your appearance and make you look older. And that's what they're doing to be able to sign on. And those who've got big brothers or big sisters are using the accounts of big brothers or big sisters. Those who come from affluent enough homes are using a second phone to get round the system. So, when you think of teenagers, you've probably got the most tech-savvy demographic in any country. And the politicians are always running to chase their tails and come up with rules which are probably out of date by the time they're implemented. And young people are like 3 years ahead of them.
Yeah. And this is the exact problem, isn't it? That the evolution of technology always outpaces any sort of government regulation or attempts to intervene, and at what stage in the process they get involved often just, as we say, leaves kids miles and miles ahead. If we accept, though, Andrew, and I think there is a consensus around this, that children's access to the internet does need to be constrained in some ways, how on earth do we go about doing that effectively? And actually, is this a household problem rather than a government problem to solve?
Well, I think there is a danger in which we expect the state to be in loco parentis. In the end, it's the job of parents to make sure their kids are not doing bad things. And to outsource this to the state, I think, is just an example of expecting a rather inefficient state. We're always saying nothing works in Britain. So why do we then say, and the government should do this, and the government should do that, and it's not doing that? It's kind of illogical, I think, to do that. And we're not banning access to the internet. Kids will still be able to access the internet. Yeah. It's just social media they can't access. So they'll still be able to find out all sorts of things that we would rather they didn't, or access all sorts of material we would rather they didn't, even if they haven't got access to social media. And so a lot of the damage that is being done could still continue to be done, but just be done in a different way by being online. And I don't think we're in a position where we're going to ban access to the internet as well as access to social media.
Andrew, can I ask you about the political point you raised at the start of this discussion on social media? Because I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel like Keir Starmer, after the week that he had, it's almost like he's decided, okay, I may have now limited time, and the things that I thought maybe I was going to get a bit more time to do, I'm going to do. Now, maybe that's me being a bit too fair, because there is still a consultation on social media. It's not like he's decided to have a ban right now. But it seems that he's almost, I don't know, maybe he's got a bit of confidence back, or maybe he's just thought, okay, fine, I'm just going to go for it. And I mean that in terms of some of the things he said about defence, although there are big questions about why we still haven't seen the defence investment strategy, and we can come on to that. But I suppose I'm asking you a little bit about what you think he's doing here with this.
I think he's desperately trying to change the conversation. I mean, so much of the conversation has been negative for the government in general, and Mr. Starmer in particular. I mean, it almost toppled him last week, and his job security is still on the line. That he is understandably, I mean, he's a politician. I don't blame him for doing this. He would like to get the public discourse, public debate, the media, doing what we're doing now, which is talking about banning social media for under 16s, because as I understand it, by and large, that's quite popular in the country. I think the Conservatives are in favour of it as well, and some of the other political parties too. So it's only natural that a politician would want to get the agenda, the public agenda, onto things that people want the government to do, rather than, as we have for the past 10 days, been talking about things that the government wouldn't really talk about at all. So I think that's the real reason. He's not a man in a hurry. He doesn't really feel that strongly about this, because he doesn't feel strongly about anything. But this is a popular policy. It doesn't make it a right policy, but it's a popular policy. And naturally, politicians want to talk about things that are popular rather than things of which they are unpopular.
Well, shall we talk about something that the government definitely doesn't want to talk about, which is the story from the Sunday Times. We had the editor of the Sunday Times, Ben Taylor, on with us earlier on. He said he hasn't had an apology, although I'm not sure he really expected one personally. But it's a really big question, this. It's the discovery that the campaign group Labour Together put together essentially a campaign against his journalists. It was off the back of a document they commissioned from a PR firm. What are the implications of this, Andrew, this story, when it comes to freedom of the press and interaction with politicians who are now at the very top of government?
Well, I was delighted to hear the editor of the Sunday Times today on Times Radio. It's a very distinguished position to be editor of the Sunday Times, I'd just like to point out. I mean, I just thought I should say that.
Many hard acts to follow in that role,
Andrew. As a factual statement, very distinguished. Did I say distinguished? Yes, very distinguished position in British journalism. I think this is appalling, and I don't think it's getting enough coverage. I mean, I think obviously we're doing it, Times Radio's doing it, Times and the Sunday Times. I think other papers need to get stuck into this as well. Just because it's about the Times or the Sunday Times in particular, doesn't mean to say it's a threat to all of us. I mean, this was an attempt, because a bunch of politicos didn't like a particular story, they attempted not to refute the story, not to try and explain away what was happening, but to undermine and smear the journalists involved, particularly one. And that 50-odd page report, 10 pages of personal stuff about the journalist, about his religion, about his attitudes. I mean, it's the kind of thing you would expect in Putin's Kremlin, not in the free-loving United Kingdom. And I think we need to know the guilty men. And I'm saying men because I'm pretty sure it's all men that are involved in this. And we know some of the names. Some of them are in government. And I think, there's enough of a witch hunt going on with everybody whose name is in the Epstein files, some of which is very serious, some of which is tangential to modern life or reality. But this goes to the very heart of a free press, and we cannot allow this to happen. And those who are responsible need to be held to account. And if they're in government, they should be fired.
I mean, that you're talking about, there is a minister who remains in the Cabinet Office. We heard from Liz Kendall earlier that the Cabinet Office is going to investigate what happened. Yeah. I did push her 3 times to ask whether it was going to investigate his role, because it's very clear that he understood the implications of the very personal information contained on 2 Sunday Times journalists in that report and disseminated it anyway. And I think that for Ben Taylor, that was the point he kept coming back to. Why was it handed out? Why was it that this narrative was being driven by information which, even just on a cursory look, it didn't seem to have any basis in fact at all?
No, it was a smear job. It was a kind of smear propaganda that totalitarian governments or authoritarian governments use. And I heard your interview with Liz Kendall, and I thought you were absolutely right to press her, and she had no answer. And I wouldn't trust the Cabinet Office to do this kind of thing. There was a time years ago when the Cabinet Office was the Rolls Royce of the British civil service. But now it's barely a Trabant. I suppose I should explain what a Trabant is. It was
Please do, for my benefit.
In communist times, which polluted the atmosphere and kept on breaking down. It was a ramshackle nonsense. And I don't think the Cabinet Office these days, which is a very diminished institution, is massive. Its biggest department is human relations. They haven't got the skills or the ability to do this. This needs an inquiry. And I don't mean by this, a 5-year, 10-year inquiry. This simply means a top barrister, for example, to be quickly appointed, given 3 months to get to the bottom of this, come up with a report and recommendations to reveal everything that went on. Because we're not being told the truth. You're quite right. What the people involved in this are, their replies. I think the editor of the Sunday Times, a very distinguished position, I think if I may have mentioned that, the editor of the Sunday Times was quite right to say that the politicians now and those involved behind the scenes, the replies they are giving us are not truthful. And they need to be held to account, because if they can do this once, where else has it been done? Because, we didn't know about this. And we don't know how else it's been. Getting this organization to do this and spend, as I understand it, I mean, you're more across the actual details than me, but tens of thousands of pounds.
Yeah, £36,000 they spent. We had somebody who messaged in before saying, well, more fool the organisation for spending that much money on something which seemed to be a lot of links from the internet, but it has had profound...
But Kate, it shows you, the fact they were prepared to spend this money shows you how desperate they were to undermine and discredit the journalists involved.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point. Well, look, Andrew, stay where you are, because we've got plenty more things the government doesn't want to discuss that we very much would like to discuss on the programme, including defence, Ukraine and Ed Miliband's very difficult choice.
We heard from Simon Schuster at The Atlantic this morning, who's been interviewing President Zelensky at the Munich Security Conference, and he said he was in a sort of confident mood, although he sensed an anxiety around this hopeful peace deal with Russia, before President Trump loses interest completely, Andrew. And this is something that's putting a deadline on Zelensky's approach to this. We heard over the weekend as well that he would offer an election in exchange for a ceasefire. How fascinating, though, that his approach to ending the war is determined by the attention span of the President of the United States.
Well, I think President Trump's already lost interest. I think he's got more interest now in Venezuela, which he runs, at least he says he runs. It'd be good if he did something about the 700 political prisoners that are still being held in a hellhole in Caracas, if he runs it. Why doesn't he get them out? More interested in Cuba, which could topple in the next couple of months. That would be a massive geopolitical story if that was to happen. And of course, he's assembling an armada, which I think is about 3 times the size of the Royal Navy, in the vicinity, in the theatre of Iran. So I think already his agenda is being overtaken. I think President Zelensky is making lots of concessions for 2 reasons. And I think they're quite shrewd reasons. One is that he doesn't want to be blamed again by President Trump for the talks failing and having to go through that punishment beating again that he got in the Oval Office, which was a disgrace to the American presidency. And secondly, I think he's concluded that it doesn't matter how much he concedes, Putin isn't going to agree to a deal because Putin thinks he can win. And all Putin had to do was look at the Munich Security Conference last week and see how, despite all the rhetoric, Europe is still not doing nearly enough to replace the American retreat from Europe, that America is retreating from Europe, that it has other fish to fry, and that it'll take a long while for the Europeans to fill the vacuum that the Americans are leaving behind. So Putin thinks he can still win. And as long as I don't think he can, by the way, but what he thinks is rather more important than what I think. And so I don't think that there will be a peace deal, and that I think that Zelensky will be able to say, look, I made all the concessions. I even said we'll have elections and a ceasefire, which isn't easy to do. And would the ceasefire last long enough for there to be elections? And also, how many cyber tricks does Russia play in the middle of these elections as well to skew the result of all of that? But I think he'll be able to say hand on heart, look, I went the final mile. I gave almost everything he was looking, or he said he was looking for, and he still didn't agree. It's not my fault that we haven't got peace.
It's interesting what you say about the European approach to this, because it was reported as well from the Munich Security Conference that European officials are getting frustrated by Britain's lack of firm commitment. This is in Politico. And there's a story around this morning that the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is considering making a significant increase in spending, in defence spending. Well, I mean, I'm considering going to the gym later, Andrew. It doesn't mean I'm going to do it.
And I'm considering not going to the gym. And that's definitely something you can take to the bank.
But this idea of almost, I mean, split is probably too strong, but there's certainly this level of frustration from Europe directed towards the UK for words on defence spending and no commitment and no action.
And the Europeans are absolutely right. Mr. Starmer talks the talk, but he doesn't walk the walk. And he's agreed to a minuscule increase in defence spending, and even that is masked by the fact that he's now including things in defence spending, including intelligence, which NATO rules don't really allow you to account. And a huge unfunded, they deserve it, that's not the point, but a huge unfunded increase in salaries in the military, which again is coming out of the defence budget, so it's not going into arms. So I think our record in defence has been appalling, and Keir Starmer should be held culpable for this. And George Robertson, who was an editor who carried out the defence review, and it's a very good defence review, and I had dinner with George the night it was published, and I said to him, is this government going to pay for it? And he said, I've had a guarantee from the Prime Minister that this is going to be paid for. Well, the guarantee is not something you could take to the bank, because we're going for a minuscule 0.2% of GDP increase in defence, with a vague aspiration to hit 3% by 2030, but no route map as how we get there. And the consequence is, and this is why the Europeans are frustrated about it, is that for most of the Cold War period and afterwards, in terms of a share of GDP, Britain was the biggest spender on defence after the United States. Where are we now in NATO? We're 12th. That's where Keir Starmer's talk has got us. Now, it started under the Conservatives, and they've got nothing to shout about. Their record on defence, except a brief period under Ben Wallace, was a shambles and a disgrace as well. But we are not spent. We need to get to 3% pronto, and then move to 3.5. Otherwise, we won't be taken seriously. The Poles get it. The Baltics get it. The Scandinavian, the peace-loving Scandinavians, they get it. And now Chancellor Merz's Germany gets it as well. The British don't, and they're running out of time to do something about it.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about defence later on in the programme, Andrew, and also that story which is in the Times today about the fact that the UK has not been able to keep up its commitments on maintaining its submarines because of concerns about the financial implications of doing so.
Which started under David Cameron. David Cameron delayed the commissioning of the new dreadnought nuclear submarines that carry our nuclear deterrent, and the result is that we've had to extend the life of the Vanguard submarines. They are creaking, and I know a lot of people in defence wonder if our nuclear deterrent is actually credible at the moment, given there's usually only one sub at sea at any one time, and sometimes for 200 days. And you can imagine what that's doing to the morale of the crews.
Yeah, and it is a real issue. It's shocking, as you say, and it's been going on for a number of years. We'll get into that later on in the programme. Andrew, before we let you go, we've had a listener request. Philip says, could you please ask Andrew Neil for a book recommendation? I've just finished The Glory and the Dream, which he recommended on your programme, and was outstanding. I'm springing this on you. Do you have any recent books that you've read that you'd recommend?
Yeah, there's another brilliant book, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's by the historian Tom Holland.
Okay.
And just Google Tom Holland or go onto one of the online bookstores and get it. And it's about the...
Is it Dominion or Rubicon?
No, it's neither of these. I think it's the one before that. But it's essentially about the final couple of centuries of the Roman Empire, based in Constantinople, how the clash with the Persian Empire, which was never quite resolved, and a combination of them knocking spots out of each other for hundreds of years, but nobody ever quite winning, plus a plague that decimated both empires for decades, suddenly created the opportunity for the rise of the Arab powers to take control not just of the Middle East, not just of Palestine, what we now call the Levant, but of Persia,
Persian
of all
fire?
of North Africa, and in the end of Constantinople, which had been the capital of the second phase of the Roman Empire. It's a fascinating study by Tom Holland.
I wonder if it's called Persian fire. Is it that
it's
one?
Not.
It's not. Okay.
Well, you're doing great, Kate, and I'm useless at remembering.
What else can we throw?
Well, when you...
I tell you, I will tweet it out when this is finished so people can read it.
Okay, there are many, many Tom Holland books. They all look brilliant. I'm not going to continue reading them. Andrew, thank you as ever. Great to have you with us.
Thank you very much to both of you.
That
Cheers,
is
Andrew.
Andrew Neil there.